The innkeeper smiled with that particular brand of continental warmth, the sort that suggests she has witnessed 1,000 such arrivals and found each one quietly amusing when she informed us we have only the honeymoon suite remaining. It was, I thought at once, an unfortunate piece of news. What proved considerably worse was the manner in which Lena squeezed my arm and answered before I could form a protest. "That is perfect," she said, and the word hung between us like a question neither of us wished to examine too closely. Perfect. Yes. For the next 48 hours, Lena and I were to perform the part of a couple, so thoroughly believable that even her grandmother, a woman whose intuition had outlasted 3 marriages and a small war, would be convinced. This was no harmless diversion, no parlor game for the bored. Her grandmother had spent the winter in and out of the hospital with a stubbornness that frightened the family more than any diagnosis, and after missing 2 family holidays, she had issued a single, non-negotiable request. The whole family together at the lake house for her 75th birthday. No drama, no gossip, no stress. And above all, no mention of Lena's recent entanglement with a man who had treated apologies the way some men treat neckties, something to be changed according to the weather. When Lena discovered that her ex, Graham, was still attending, having apparently bonded with her brother over poker and bourbon in the way that only certain men can, she panicked, not from any lingering affection. Rather, she could not bear the thought of her grandmother spending the weekend watching him hover about her like a piece of unfinished business. "I need one clean weekend," she had told me over coffee 3 days earlier, her hands wrapped around the mug as though it might anchor her. "One weekend where no one looks at me as though I am fragile, or waiting for him to return. And your solution is me? You are stable," she said, which is perhaps the least romantic proposition ever uttered across a cafe table. "You are also good under pressure." That sounds rather like being hired for a hostage exchange. She had leaned across then, and I had caught the scent of her bergamot and something colder. Something that had always been uniquely hers. "Evan, please." That was the trouble with Lena. I had known her since we were 12, since the era of braces and unfortunate haircuts, since the year she was suspended for pouring orange juice into the principal's ornamental fountain because he had described her as spirited in a parent meeting. She remained spirited, though considerably better dressed now, and far more dangerous to my equilibrium. We had spent years being the sort of friends people misread at first glance, too easy together, too familiar, too quick with one another. The sort of dynamic that made waiters treat separate checks as a personal affront. My sister had once watched Lena steal a bite from my plate, borrow my jacket, and then inform me that my posture was emotionally dishonest, before turning to me and remarking, "You do realize that normal friendships do not resemble soft-launched marriages." We had laughed. We always laughed. It had become our finest skill, laughing at the very thing neither of us wished to examine too closely. And so, when she asked me to pretend to be her partner for a weekend, I ought to have refused. Instead, I asked, "How convincing must it be?" She had looked at me over the rim of her cup. "Convincing enough that Graham leaves me alone, and that Grandma has a peaceful birthday." Which was how I came to be driving with her through a snowstorm toward a lakeside inn, with a single overnight bag, a counterfeit relationship, and absolutely no comprehension of how thoroughly this arrangement would undo me. By the time we arrived, the roads were half ice, and the lobby smelled of pine, wet wool, and the sweet smoke of a birchwood fire. Lena's family had already filled the main house, which was precisely why we found ourselves at the inn down the road. 1 room remaining, 1 bed, the honeymoon suite, the sort of situation the universe contrives only when it is both bored and mildly cruel. The room itself was beautiful in a way that made everything worse. An iron bed frame, a quilted blanket of faded indigo, a single lamp by the window, a fireplace already lit and crackling with quiet authority. There was no sofa. There was no useful distance of any kind. Lena set down her bag and surveyed the room once, slowly, as though memorizing it. Then she turned to me. "If you laugh," she said, "I will kill you." "I am not laughing. That is because you are in shock. That is because your family apparently books romance-themed lodging as a form of threat." She rubbed her forehead. "We can manage 1 bed. Can we?" She looked at me, then truly looked, not with her usual brightness, not with the quick wit that was her armor, but with a tiredness that was almost honest. "We have managed harder things than 1 bed," she said quietly. That landed deeper than it ought to have. Because she was right. We had managed funerals, layoffs, panic attacks at 3 a.m, my father's surgery, her divorce filing, my own year of pretending I was whole after my engagement ended. We were good at hard things. That did not mean I wished to lie beside her in the dark and pretend that my body had never once understood something before my brain granted it permission. Dinner at the lake house was precisely the exhausting performance I had anticipated. Graham attempted casualness with the enthusiasm of a man who had rehearsed it in the mirror. Lena's mother watched us as though we were a delightful puzzle she intended to solve before dessert. Her grandmother, sharp as a winter star, merely smiled and patted my hand once, with the air of a woman who knew considerably more than everyone else in the room combined. Lena played her part beautifully. Too beautifully. Her hand on my sleeve, her easy smiles, the way she leaned against me when she laughed, the way she looked up at me during stories as though I had always been built into them. By the drive back to the inn, I was having considerable difficulty remembering which parts of the evening had been performance, and which parts had always been there, waiting. Neither of us spoke much while preparing for bed. She changed in the bathroom. I changed facing the fireplace, like a man in some old continental film attempting not to fail a moral test. Then the lights were extinguished, and Lena was in bed beside me. Not touching, not speaking, simply there. The mattress dipped when she turned once. Snow scratched softly at the window. Somewhere below us, pipes knocked in the walls like a distant clock. I was almost asleep when I felt it. Her fingers light, barely there, beginning at the back of my neck and tracing slowly down my spine through the thin cotton of my shirt. Every thought in my body stopped. Then her voice came, low and too close in the dark. "If we are keeping up the act," she whispered, "you cannot go rigid every time I touch you." I did not move. That was the first mistake. The second was answering honestly. "I am rigid," I said into the dark, "because you are tracing my spine as though we are either married or in trouble." Her hand stopped. For a moment I thought she would withdraw it entirely. Instead, her fingers remained, resting between my shoulders. "Perhaps both," she murmured. That did not help. I turned onto my back and regarded a ceiling I could not quite see. "Lena." "What?" "You cannot do that and sound casual." A soft laugh. "I am not casual right now." There it was. Not teasing. Not performance. Something lower and truer. I turned my head toward her. "Then what are you?" Quiet stretched between us, thick as the snow outside. Then she said, "Tired." Fair, but not the whole truth. I knew because I had known her too long, so I asked the question I ought to have asked before agreeing to any of this. "Why me?" She rolled onto her back beside me. I could hear it in the mattress. "I asked you," she said slowly, "because I knew you would not take advantage of it. That landed first, then the rest of it did. Because there was more in it than trust, more than convenience." I kept my voice even. "That is not the only reason." "No." The honesty of that nearly undid me. Lena folded one arm beneath her head. "I asked you because you make me feel safe when everything else grows loud. And because if I had to pretend to be happy with anyone for a weekend, a pause, you were the only person I could stand that close to." My pulse had become a serious administrative problem. "You wanted honesty." I did. Then there it is. The room felt smaller now, warmer too, as though the fireplace had somehow reached all the way into the bed. I swallowed once. "You know that is not easy for me to hear." Her voice softened. "I know." "No," I said. "I do not think you do." That made her turn toward me. I could not see much, but I could feel her looking. "With you," I said carefully, "there has always been a point where the joke stops being a joke, and neither of us says anything useful afterward." She let out a breath that sounded too much like agreement. Then, very quietly, "Perhaps I am tired of that part too." That was the moment the room changed. Not because she kissed me, not because I touched her, but because suddenly both of us were awake inside something we had spent years pretending not to notice, and neither of us trusted it enough to move first. A phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lena cursed softly, grabbed it, and the spell cracked just enough for breathing to become possible again. "It is my mother. Apparently Grandma wants us there early for breakfast. Your family is relentless. My family is bored." Morning did not improve matters. The lake house was loud, warm, overfed, and full of the sort of relatives who can smell tension the way hounds smell a storm. Lena sat beside me at breakfast and kept one hand on my forearm as though she had forgotten to stop performing. Unfortunately, my body had noticed the difference between performance and the previous night. Graham noticed something too. He caught me alone by the coffee station while Lena's grandmother was being helped out to the porch. "You look tired," he said. "You look unemployed in spirit," I replied. He smiled thinly, charming. I started to move around him. Then he said, "You know she only does this when she is cornered, yes?" That stopped me. He lifted his mug. The smiling, the easy touching, the whole times I am absolutely fine and doing better than ever times routine, he wore it like a borrowed coat. He looked toward the porch, where Lena was laughing at something her grandmother had said. She hates being pitied more than she hates being hurt. Anger came quickly, not because I believed him entirely, because he knew enough to be dangerous. "She seems quite finished with you," I said. His expression shifted, just slightly. "That is not what I said." Before I could answer, Lena appeared beside me, all soft eyes and steel. "There you are," she said to me, slipping her hand into mine. "Grandma wants a photograph by the dock." Graham looked at our joined hands, then at her face, then away. That ought to have felt like victory. It did not, because Lena's hand tightened once, harder than she intended, and I felt precisely how shaken she actually was. We made it halfway across the yard before I said, "What did he mean?" Lena kept walking. Nothing useful. That was not my question. I know. We reached the dock steps. The lake below was half silver, half ice. The wind cut hard across the water, and Lena finally stopped. "He meant," she said, not looking at me, "that he knows I fake being fine better than most people." I waited. Then she turned to me, her eyes clear and far too honest for daylight. "And right now," she said softly, "I need you to help me do more than fake it." I frowned. "How?" She looked past my shoulder toward the house, then back at me. And in a voice low enough that only I could hear, she said, "If I ask you to kiss me in the next 5 minutes, do not hesitate." That commanded my full attention. I looked at Lena. "Why 5 minutes?" "Because that is about how long it will take Graham to wander over here, pretending he merely wishes to help with the photographs." Right on cue, voices floated down from the porch. Her brother was carrying folding chairs. Her mother had a camera. Graham was already heading our way with the lazy confidence of a man who believed proximity still meant something. Lena's hand found my sleeve. Not for show, not entirely. "Please," she said, low enough that only I heard. And so, when the family began gathering by the dock and Graham stepped too close on her left, I did not hesitate. I took Lena's face in both hands and kissed her. The whole world narrowed, cold air, her breath catching, her fingers gripping my coat. One beat in which I told myself this was for the act. Then the second beat came, and that lie died at once. Because Lena kissed me back as though she had been restraining the same mistake for years. Somewhere behind us, her aunt made an excited sound. Her brother said, "Finally," like an exhausted man completing paperwork. Her grandmother laughed sharp, delighted, unstoppable. When I pulled back, Lena stayed close for half a second too long. Then she opened her eyes. And whatever she saw on my face made her own change completely. Not panic, not embarrassment, recognition. "Photograph first," her mother said, far too brightly. We somehow made it through 3 pictures. Graham disappeared. Her grandmother kept smiling at us with the dangerous satisfaction of an elderly woman who had outlived patience. The second the family became distracted by decisions about cake and comments about the weather, Lena grabbed my wrist and pulled me down the side path toward the old boathouse. The door shut behind us. Quiet. Dust, rope, the smell of the lake, old cedar. Lena turned to face me and simply stood there, breathing. I gave her a moment. So, she repeated. That did not feel like fake dating. She let out one short laugh and dragged a hand through her hair. No, it really did not. I leaned against the workbench by the wall. "Do you wish to tell me what that was then?" Her eyes lifted to mine. No shields now. No family around to perform for. "That," she said, "was me asking for 5 minutes of safety and receiving something considerably more inconvenient." Despite myself, I smiled. She pointed at me. Do not what? Look pleased while I am having an existential crisis in a boathouse. I am not pleased. You are a little pleased. Perhaps a little. That earned the smallest smile from her, but it faded quickly. Because the truth was still there between us. Last night. The bed. Her hand on my spine. The kiss by the dock that had gone off script and refused to apologize. Lena crossed her arms. "I need to know something." "All right. When you kissed me just now, was that because I asked?" I answered too quickly to fake it. "No." Her breath caught. I stepped closer. Slowly. "I kissed you because you looked at me as though you were about to disappear into one more performance, and I could not bear it." She did not move. Neither did I. "And," I added, "because if I am being honest, I wish to know whether last night was only about proximity and nostalgia." I held her gaze. It was not. Lena looked down for a moment, then back up. "No," she said softly, "it was not." The boathouse felt smaller now. Warmer, too, even with the cold coming off the lake. "I am trying very hard to be responsible," I said. "That seems unlike you. It is new. That is not what I meant." I smiled a little. "I know." She took one step toward me, then stopped. "Evan, if we stop pretending now, I do not know how to go back." That was it. The real fear. Not Graham, not the family, not one bed. Us. I nodded once. "I know. You say that very calmly for someone who ought to be at least a little alarmed." "I am extremely alarmed." "Good." "Lena." "What?" "I do not want to go back." The silence after that felt alive. She stared at me as though I had just pulled the floor out from under every safe version of this weekend and handed her the dangerous one instead. Then she asked, barely above a whisper, "Even if this changes everything?" I stepped closer until there was almost no space left between us. Especially then, her eyes went bright. Not tears, just too much truth arriving at once. Then a voice called from outside. Lena, her mother shouted, your grandmother wants the birthday toast before she grows tired. Lena closed her eyes and let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like laughter and defeat. Of course she does, she muttered. I touched her wrist lightly. We are not finished. She looked at my hand, then at my face. No, she said, we really are not. We stepped back into the cold, both of us looking precisely like people who had just changed their lives in a boathouse and were now expected to smile politely through cake. As we reached the porch steps, Lena's grandmother caught one look at us and said, loud enough for the entire family to hear, well, about time somebody stopped lying. And with that, every eye on the porch turned toward us. Her grandmother sat wrapped in a quilt, hands folded over her cane, looking so pleased with herself that I briefly considered inventing a sudden illness to avoid the next 5 minutes. Lena, beside me, muttered, I am never recovering from this. Her grandmother lifted one eyebrow. From what? Being obvious? That earned a round of laughter from the family. Even Lena's mother covered her mouth to hide a smile. Her brother looked openly vindicated. Graham, to his credit, had the good sense to look away and say nothing at all. Lena drew in one breath, then did the last thing I expected. She reached for my hand. Not for the act, not because anyone was watching, because she wished to. That single choice settled something in me. The nerves did not disappear, but they stopped feeling like a warning and began to feel like a door finally opening. Her grandmother patted the empty chair beside her. Sit, both of you. I am too old to enjoy this standing up. So we sat. The birthday toast was supposed to concern family, health, gratitude, all the things people say when they are attempting not to cry before dessert. But halfway through, her grandmother looked straight at Lena and then at me and said, you waste enough time in this life waiting for perfect moments. They do not exist. If you love somebody, be brave while you still have the chance. Nobody laughed at that. Nobody moved either. The whole porch went still. I felt Lena's fingers tighten around mine. Not hard, just enough to tell me the line had landed exactly where it was meant to. After the cake and the photographs and the slow unraveling of the evening, people drifted inside one by one. Her parents went to help clean up. Her brother took his grandmother's chair. Graham left without making a scene, which was more grace than he had shown all weekend. That left Lena and me alone on the porch with the last of the cold light on the lake. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Then she asked, was that awful? The kiss? Or the public exposure? Both. I looked at her. No, she smiled faintly. You are taking this suspiciously well. I am trying not to ruin the first good thing that has happened to me all year. That changed her face, softened it. She turned toward me fully, one shoulder brushing mine. Then tell me something without hiding behind humor. Fair. I took a breath and gave her exactly that. I have loved you in a way that was too large for friendship for longer than I wish to admit, I said. I simply kept calling it something safer, because I thought that if I named it, I might lose you. Lena held my gaze. And now? Now I think not naming it was how I nearly lost you. That one sat between us in the best possible way. No performance left. No pretending the family had forced this into the open. The truth was they had merely cornered something that was already alive. Lena looked out at the lake for a moment, then back at me. I need you to know something, too. All right. I did not ask you to come this weekend only because of Graham. She gave a small, embarrassed smile. I mean, that part was real, but it was not the whole thing. I waited. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I missed you before this, not in the dramatic, ruined my life way, in the everyday way, the grocery store way, the drive home way. The times I saw something stupid and went to text you anyway, times way. Her voice softened, and I think I was tired of standing this close to the truth and still pretending it was nothing. That nearly undid me. So I did the only thing that felt right. I kissed her again. Not because anyone was watching, not because there was still a point to prove, simply because she was there, and honest, and finally mine to stop pretending about. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine and laughed softly. What? I asked. We still have to share that bed tonight. I smiled. That does seem considerably less emotionally survivable now. It really does. We did survive it, though not by sleeping much. Mostly we talked. Really talked. About the years we had spent laughing things off. About her divorce. About all the moments that made more sense in hindsight. About the small, ordinary ways we had been choosing each other for years without quite admitting it. By the time morning came, nothing about us felt fragile. Exposed, yes. New, not exactly. It felt more like something we had been carrying for years had finally been set down where both of us could see it. 3 months later, Lena still steals fries off my plate. I still tell her she is impossible. Her family has become unbearable in the way only loving families can be. Her grandmother refers to me as times the boy who finally caught up, which I have been forced to admit is accurate. And the strange thing is that none of it felt rushed after that weekend. It felt late. Late in the best possible way, like a letter that had been traveling for years and had only just arrived at the correct address. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I think of that innkeeper's smile. I think of the snow against the window, the iron bed frame, the single lamp. I think of her fingers on my spine, and of the moment I realized that the most dangerous thing in the world is not losing someone you love, it is never having admitted, even to yourself, that you did.